Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third community discussions on Shape of Cosmos. Today we have me, Dojmos, would be moderating a lot of the discussions that are happening. We have uh, Zaki from Inclusion, Tariq, who's been leading the Unify DAO and also part of Promise Protocols. We have Pong,
Oh,
he's the CEO of Tendermint, Gavin from Figment Network, and today we are actually joined by Ethan from Informal Systems as well. So thank you all for being here, and it's a huge pleasure to be with you guys. Um, I think today it was kind of a continuation of something that we discussed last week. We started the discussion, and I think decided to kind of start some of that here. And I think the idea was talking about another token that could exist for the Cosmos Hub, whether that's in the form of photons or some other name, I think. Um, but I think I really wanted to kind of get into what are some of the um, specifications of this token that we want, and also kind of get into the economic side of it, what its role should be, and yeah. So anyone kind of like to start us off in that direction?
Um, I would say that sort of my biggest thought process here about having another token on the Cosmos Hub is I think that another token could play potentially what starts out to be a relatively small role in the hub economy. I'm not generally a big fan of um, of, of 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 marrying that token to any key functionality. But I also would say that as we kind of go further down the road of like Atom 2021 and staking derivatives, and atoms get more and more complicated, I think that there would be a lot of value to having a simple token that provided some entitlement to fee revenue or other future revenue of the hub. That would be easier for a retail user who is interested in Cosmos to hold, as opposed to the complexities of holding atoms.
I guess kind of to step back a little bit. What do you think is, or what do you think are some of the characteristics of the atom that makes it maybe not the best fit for that type of design?
Sure. So I think there are a number of things that make atoms very sort of complex to use. So they have these governance rights, which requires sort of paying attention, rapidly making decisions about things that are going on in the Cosmos Hub. We can certainly make governance easier to use through things like subkeys, but nevertheless, they have these complexities around them. They either require, in its current form, locking up large amounts of capital, which is difficult for people, or in the future, in a staking derivatives world, it requires, managing these staking derivatives and making decisions associated with them. Those are, I think, probably the first things. The other things that are complicated are, there are slashing risks associated with your staked atoms, and that's another a challenging thing for a low information user to really understand what those slashing risks might be.
hi.
Welcome, Jay.
Hello. So I think let's assume there's a token that's like used for many things. I think we can assume, number one, there's going to be such a token that's owned by the Cosmos Hub, and it's going to get inflated, not in an exponential way, but some fee token that inflates like Dogecoin or Ether at a constant rate, which is in practice neither deflationary nor inflationary. And you're going to want to cram as many use cases into that token because it's the easiest to hold. The value is quasi stable, at least compared to the Atom or other tokens. It's worth trying to stabilize. You can derive a stable coin on top, and then the more use cases you add onto that, the more popular it gets. But so there needs to be that token. It's inevitable, I'd say. But
I think inevitability is a very weak argument. Make a more persuasive argument. Like, I'm not persuaded.
It's not an argument. It's just it's a point. I can dive into it. Yeah. Why? Okay. Why is that inevitable? Because the Cosmos Hub, being this sovereign entity, like any other empire or city-state or nation, it's going to want to mint its own coin for commerce, so that and it's like and having the ability to create such a token and decide on issuance and whatnot, and by virtue of spreading it, getting the benefit of what we call provisionary photons, right? Every block getting an amount inflated going to the staked atom holders is the biggest like cash cow in finance, I'd say, that there is. In the same way that the Federal Reserve and the banking system creates dollars kind of through thin air, and they're able to mold geopolitics with it. So like, why wouldn't the Cosmos Hub want such a thing? Every blockchain, every hub's going to want such a thing, wouldn't they?
I think we should definitely be headed in the direction of cattle farming.
Cattle farming?
Right? So
yeah. Well, I think we should be careful. But okay, so I'm going to assume that there is. So assuming that there is such a token, I'd say then there's going to be the impetus to try to use that token for staking on the Cosmos Hub. So using that token to stake in order to decide how that non-inflationary, non-additive token is going to be issued. And I'm thinking that's dangerous because there's so much of that other non-inflationary token, the quote-unquote photon token, that now the system becomes vulnerable to massive changes in ownership, because anytime a whale says, fuck this, I want to control the financial infrastructure, now they can take a chance, try to buy up, stake a bunch of their tokens and get ownership of the system. So the system becomes open to hostile takeover. So that's why the Atom, I'd say, needs to be separated from such a token. That's why the Atom exists, to try to create a more pure stake-based token that is separated intentionally from the photon, so that such hostile takeovers don't happen.
The one thing I'm wondering about is whether such a token should be generated from staked Atom. Like, is there a world where we use staked Atom as collateral to generate a Cosmos Hub native, photon style thing, or maybe it's a stable coin. Maybe there's like a proof of stake collateralized stable coin mechanism. I just wonder if there's another native token on the hub, how other zones think about sort of the meaning, the economic meaning of that token with respect to the, say, native tokens of their zones, right? Why per se should there be a new native token on the hub versus competition in or experimentation in the many tokens from many different zones?
So okay, I'll try to answer that.
To close the loop, unless there's sort of a direct linkage between that token and the atoms. I mean, one link is potentially earning it in fees for staking the atoms, but another possible idea is that it's generated from the atoms, so that, for instance, people with atom stake can also gain some liquidity from that, maybe in a mechanism that's different than like delegation vouchers. But if you can borrow against your staked atom, for instance, and use that to pay fees, that might be a mechanism to satisfy this inevitability, as you call it.
I think it's inevitable with just like every provisionary photons going to staked atom holders, and I think the more we try to keep atom as simple and minimal as possible, so to the extent that we just keep it more or less for staking, the better it is, because there's less complications that come from it. So anytime you try to add more things to the atom token, it's going to make it more difficult to prove that there's actually something at stake ultimately, because with complications you can try to create some way to disrupt the system and destroy it, and also perhaps benefit financially from doing so, right?
I guess this was briefly brought up, but why couldn't staking derivatives, delegation vouchers / liquid staking tokens kind of have this role of it sounds like in terms of the design, you get something out of staking your atom, but the value itself is separated. I think a lot of the risks that exist of using the atom itself in utility that's outside of staking may be mitigated. So I'm just kind of curious what your thought is on
that. I think I don't think that liquid staking should be used in lieu of photons. I think kind of like generally the less you try to, it's not really currency. I think liquid staking tokens are still fundamentally, in their asset class, what they represent is the underlying atoms, right? Just a slightly more liquid. But I still don't think that's good for as a replacement for photons. I mean, like when people use photons, they want a simple property that here's a photon, and there's like little risk that this photon will say suddenly depreciate in value. But liquid staking tokens always have that condition. It's always vulnerable to being splashed. So why use that when you can just use photons instead? Right?
Are you suggesting that photons would be like a stablecoin?
I'm saying it's more stable than atoms. It's more like a stablecoin than atoms, and I think that it's the basis for creating a stablecoin. So the photon, like Ether, it's like it can be this gas token, so it's quasi-stable. It's more stable than other ERC20 tokens, but it's not quite stable, and it should be used on to build stablecoins on top.
And why use that and bootstrap a new sort of stablecoin collateral versus adopting DAI over an ETH peg or e-money or Agoric stablecoin or other stablecoins in the ecosystem?
Right. Well, it's like why? I think that question is a lot like why use the dollar when you're in the U.S. and not other currencies like the franc or the euro. And I think it's because it comes with benefits to use a native fee token. So with any other token that's not a native token, it's the peg could fail, right? But if you trust enough in just the Cosmos Hub's governance abilities with regards to the Photon token, then there's less risk of a peg failure. You eliminate that. You're just worried about, is the Cosmos Hub governance sufficiently competent to be able to ensure that all Photon holders, are going to be safe. And also, the Cosmos Hub has like any other hub or blockchain, like Ethereum has an incentive to see people use Ether. The Cosmos Hub has an incentive to see people use photons, and there will be benefits, I imagine, that are negotiated for its users to use photons. Maybe there's some slight benefit, slight reduction in transaction fees, maybe benefits to your zone if you whitelist a photon token.
So is the idea here is that we have this kind of new token that's the same way if I were to hold a Canadian dollar or US dollar, I don't need to really think about like I don't have to really think about like the policy of that. I can just enjoy the benefits of the buying power of that, and it might not be necessarily as stable as the U.S. dollar because the U.S. dollar is so prevalent. But eventually, as this new token becomes more prevalent, it could have that similar level of stability. And what I enjoy is the exposure to the value of the network and the policies that network sets without the responsibilities and the volatility of participating in that.
Yeah, you get more safety. The more use cases you cram into the photon, the more use cases are, just more stable it becomes. So you want as many use cases as possible, so many people use it, so it becomes kind of this replacement for fiat. And yeah, you slightly benefit from uptick in the network. So as the Cosmos Hub succeeds, you have an exposure to it in the same way that you have exposure to ETH or Bitcoins. And you don't have to be a Bitcoin miner professional in order to get exposure to Bitcoins, right? Yeah, exactly.
I have a question about you said that it wouldn't be inflationary, it wouldn't be deflationary. If there's new issuance, how come that wouldn't be considered inflationary?
Okay, because any such currency token always has people who are losing these tokens, and that rate must surely change and fluctuate over time. But in the long run, there's a steady state of some percentage of tokens being lost. That's like small, right? And so if you balance that against the constant issuance, C, every block, then there's some equilibrium. So, and that equilibrium is the market cap, or the market cap and total number. Well, not the market cap, but the total number of active coins times the price of the coin will be, I guess, some active market cap would always be stable.
I think for me, the concept is more difficult to understand, maybe more difficult for Atom holders to understand, unless they knew how much they were getting, right? So what would be the proposed token distribution for the photon if we were to propose that on the hub?
What would be the
token distribution plan for the photon?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. For the longest time, I was thinking, let's hard spoon Ethereum. I guess the only constraint that I really see is it needs to be some reasonable distribution, but there needs to be some initial distribution such that the constant issuance relative to the total number of photons, the ratio is small enough that people don't feel like it's a waste of time, or that the inflation tax is going to be too high for them. So if we start with 0 and then say that there's constant issuance of photons, like 100 photons a year, that wouldn't work for many years because people will say this is going to inflate too much. But if we start off with 1,000,000 photons and then say, at the first year it's just going to be like 3% that's being inflated, and then whatever that constant amount is the amount forever, then that's more reasonable for people to hold. So I think it could just be a copy of the atom distribution to start off with. Maybe it makes sense to also add heart spoons later for simplicity to like Ethereum and so on.
I guess it's,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The one question that I have is I think we do see a lot of other DeFi focused projects wanting to use the Atom, and I think that's potentially because of the liquidity that exists around the Atom. It's a very simple fiat gateway. People in a lot of countries can get it. It's fairly easy to convert, fiat money into atoms, and I feel like, what would be the utility that the photon or the secondary token provides that could potentially exceed the value of liquidity that exists around the atom.
And if I could jump in and say that, I'll follow up with that point and say that, just this week I've reached out to about, over 380 exchanges in our ecosystem for crypto. And, the top 5 exchanges, the Coinbases and the Krakens, they love us. They love to hear from, what's going on in Cosmos. But for the majority of centralized exchanges, the atom that they have listed is doing nothing. And I think the concept of having the photon may be ideal, but you've just essentially destroyed your atom brand in the exchange ecosystem by launching this new coin, which is supposed to be tied to the atom. Why? Because you're going to have to now explain why this thing is valuable. And you can't say, we hope it will be valuable. You can't say it will have secondary effects, because as soon as you say it has secondary effects, what exchanges and everybody else will say is, we will wait to see it proved. So you've now taken on the cost of actually structuring these secondary effects and proving that the hypothesis, which this is what it is right now, is indeed right. That, in my opinion, will destroy your brand equity you have currently with atoms, because every exchange will say, we'll wait to see it as evidence, which is the problem I have. Like, if you ask me, Tarek, what I spend, hold on. If you say, what do I spend my time doing? Is I spend my time convincing folks that atom has value. If I now have to convince them that atom has no value, because what's really valuable is a photon, then I have a problem. I have a much, much harder hill to climb, and I'm going to lose a lot of exchanges. So the question I have is, what is the plan to save the value of the atom from the eventual, what I call doubt and fall in value, because of the idea that they now have to consider this new token as really the true token of value
I'd say,
for the Cosmos Hub?
There's by creating the photon in the way I'm suggesting, you end up with a higher value atom, and also it's not a competition between value going toward, it's not the competition between the market cap of photons versus market cap of atoms. I'd say in the steady state is some ratio between them. I don't know what the right ratio is, but I'm thinking something like 50-50, perhaps. In the same way that I think atom versus photon is like Bitcoin mining infrastructure versus Bitcoins. So it's like,
but then atoms need to be generated directly by, like, if you have if photons are generated by, say, a bonding curve that actually preserves that invariant, then something like that might make sense. It might be a lot easier for people to reason about the relative value because the ratio of, like, algorithmically important.
Well, the bonding curve would make that ratio float. I'm saying we don't want a bonding curve because there's an innate relationship between atoms and photons where, photons are generated by atom holders. So atoms becomes this perpetual right, if you stake them and continue to hold a proportion of atoms of inflation of photons. It's kind of like, what is the ratio between all the banks that participate in banking infrastructure in the country? So the sum total of the capital market cap of banks, if the banks only did banking activities, right, and not investment, crazy other stuff, versus the total monetary supply, right? It's not a competition between them; it's a ratio. If there's more demand for that money, the banks will do that much better, because what they're all doing is earning, some percent of every transaction.
Yes, but what you have done is you have now bifurcated script. And if you have bifurcated script, you're going to have to market one over the other. People have limited time, they have limited patience. And like I said in my last meeting, there is competition. If you do not care about the competition, if you say, the competition be damned, atom holders, will, the outcomes or impacts of other tokens which do not have this level of complexity is not a matter of us, then yes, I think, you take your risk. But the question is, how will you recover the loss of value for atom holders who now have to argue and put in the time and money to assert that the photon is something that will drive value, when today We do not know if that value drive or
I
that
think,
demand.
okay, so the other point, just to respond to your last point before I go into the greater one, people kept saying that we have to go like pitch to exchanges, right? The value for the atom to be listed, and and we were always like, whatever, we're just not going to deal with it, and we'll wait until they see the value of what we're creating. And that's what happened. They started adding atoms. It's because we make cool stuff, and we were able to justify our designs.
That is not remotely what happened. Other people went. And
Yeah, of
did
course.
the work,
There's always
and
people going right
changes.
to do the work, but like, if the design, please let me finish.
Yeah, I think people who did the work for atoms are not willing to do it for
okay.
photons.
That would be true if it were the case that I can't justify my these choices. But if we can justify them and we can explain them, I mean, if we can explain them Byzantine fault tolerance and atom staking, I think they're going to understand the photon argument. It's not that complicated. So we just have to explain why this is better, the benefits of this, and I don't think it matters too much whether people actually adopt photons at exchanges, because there's still going to be utility via all of these centralized DeFi applications we're building on the Cosmos world. So if maybe, by virtue, it's sufficient for the atom to be there, because then as long as we build the bridge, the decentralized bridges, the DeFi bridges from atoms to photons, and we focus on the utility of photons in the Cosmos realm, like there's enough of a bridge for people to come over and start using photons. And ultimately, photons are and interchain staking and the DEX is, these are all activities that happen on the Cosmos realm, blockchain world. So the utility will be there if we build things like interchain staking and DEXs. So people will want photons. It makes more sense to use photons as the base token for trade pairs in a DEX zone than to use atoms.
No, quick question. When you say that, when you say it makes more sense, what sense are you talking about specifically? When you say it makes more sense to trade photon on the DEX?
Yeah, in the sense that you're less penalized via various things, but chiefly the inflation tax.
Yeah, I mean the primary issue is people don't want to have to hold liquid atoms to be used for other things because they want them to be staked, in the proof of stake mechanism. So the sort of path ahead is like, do we go a route where we add some complexity to the proof of stake mechanism to enable people with staked atoms to somehow access some kind of liquidity that they can use on other chains, or is there another thing we introduce, something like a photon that is issued to staked atom holders, say continuously, and that's maybe the mechanism by which they achieve some liquidity to go play on other exchanges, right? Is that a fair characterization, Jay?
I'd say if anytime I feel like you're suggesting that we use liquid staking tokens for various things.
No, not necessarily. I'm saying that if the staked, like if somehow a staked atom could serve as collateral for generating photons through a bonding curve or through a stablecoin mechanism that generated a stablecoin, some other more directly tied mechanism versus just the token being issued as a reward.
As a reward. Okay, well, here's another tie. By social contract, we make it explicit that the photon's home is the Cosmos hub, and therefore, anytime there's a dispute about a financial transaction, the jurisdiction where this is settled is on the Cosmos hub by the staked atom holders, right? And I think that implies a tremendous amount of judicial activity and services that the Cosmos hub can offer and should offer to make a photon a safe thing to use for consumers, mass consumers, because we need the this kind of infrastructure that the existing financial system already has. They've created a very complex system with checks and balances, and it's not sufficient to just have a token, and say here's a good currency. I mean, Bitcoin does that pretty well, trying to be, but look at like Prop 29. We're discussing what is moral. Like I think there's some agreement about various things that governments should take part in. So you should use the photon token. It's safer for people to use the photon token in our ecosystem because.
But okay, so that's what I'm trying to understand. When you say safer, where does the safety come from? Where does the lack of volatility come from? It would be one thing, and maybe it'd be easier for people to understand and digest if the safety or the stability was somehow collateralized by atoms or staked atoms or something like that. But for it to be
it is, but it is collateralized by. Okay, so here's what I mean. Like, it's got the safety of the Cosmos hub because the validators, the staked atom holders, they have a stake in that token as much as atoms. It's the same thing, just split between what's in a nucleus and outside a nucleus, but it's the same cell. So
I mean,
sorry,
I think in a
I'll come back
technical
to my point.
sense, it will be more secure. But I guess the connection that I'm trying to make is what is the economic connection?
Yeah,
because I don't think I'm quite seeing that yet.
Right. It's exactly the economics as holding non-staked atoms, right? Most people, consumers, should not be staking their atoms because that's supposed to be a professional, job. Most people don't have what it takes to know what validator is more secure because the realm of this stuff is technology at its core, hard to understand because most people aren't technologists, but it's easy to try to convince people that this is what you should do. But people are going to be misled if we're not careful about the nature of atoms and what they're doing when they delegate to a validator in order to eke out some small percentage, interest. We want to explain to people this is dangerous. Don't do it unless you know what you're doing, because you can lose all of the tokens that you're delegating. Imagine massive amounts of people losing their 401ks because people didn't understand that what they were doing was risking losing everything. So it's our moral obligation to explain that and distinguish it this way. So it's safer, just as safe as non-bonded atoms, but it's economically more viable because it doesn't inflate at 7 to 20%.
So the idea here is that the only way you can access where it's kind of like this like push and pull or oppositional position between having liquid staked atoms versus having a separate token, right? Like
I think they're a little like maybe 2 steps removed from me, so I don't see a direct relationship there. I see liquid staked atoms as being a short-term utility for small usages among experts, but that it's not a replacement or alternative to a currency token, because a currency is one that like your banknote receipt is not currency, and people don't accept it at markets.
I have a couple of thoughts here on Photon. One is, the more I think about it, the more it seems like it's just a term for unstaked atoms. Right?
They're not atoms.
Not really.
It's a term for unstaked atoms that don't suffer the inflation tax.
They're not atoms.
But they do suffer the inflation.
They do
tax
suffer some
because
inflation
they're-
tax. Well,
not as much.
you don't actually, in the long run, in the steady state, you don't suffer in the inflation tax, because the amount being created of new photons is equivalent to the amount being lost through just people dying, for example.
So I see, right, photons as a name for basically unstaked atoms. I know it's not totally accurate, but bear with me here. And but the only way you get photons is by staking atoms. So when we want, non-technical people to hold photons and participate in the ecosystem, the only way they can get photons is by staking atoms. So they're still going to want to stake atoms instead of hold on to photons.
Huh?
Zaki, you're muted.
No, I don't. Okay, so I believe I'll always find a way to convince you that, it's not the case that everyone's going to want to hold or stake atoms rather than hold photons. For one, I think there's going to be, I believe there will be more value interchange staked into and out of the Cosmos Hub than what is staked for the Cosmos Hub itself through atoms.
Jake,
and that should be done with photons. Yeah, what's up?
I do want to give Zaki a chance to speak as well.
Right, thanks. Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is that it's very the notion of a photon is essentially this group business development project. It's like an atom holder group project to sort of make a new coin and then make it valuable. It's sort of how I would describe it, which is I think that's probably the best way that the world would understand whether or not photons are valuable, is you're betting on this idea that the group project will be successful and the group project will build utility for that. I think the part of the challenge there is, to a certain extent, the world perceives atoms as is essentially already that group project, and this level of indirection between them, where you're essentially, from the point of view of the world, you're making the same bet as you're making with atoms. The inflation tax is a small amount compared to crypto volatility, that I don't think people really care that much about that. They're betting on whether or not the sort of social organization of atom holders can be successful, and giving them just another token to bet on that question is really, I think, not helpful for that project.
I think I do want to kind of bring this up too, because I think I see in the comments mentions of other projects that have tried to create a secondary token, with Neo and Gas, and VeChain has V4. And what has often happened is the lack of liquidity that exists around the fee token just make it prime target for speculators pump and dump schemes, right? And what ends up happening is the validators per se don't even accept the secondary token as the fee token, just because from their perspective, it's more convenient for them to get the most liquid token out there. So unless there's a clear utility that's outlined for the secondary token, and I don't think social contract is the best way to set this, because I think there has to be solid economic incentives, and I'm just kind of curious what that would be, because I don't quite see that, at least this time.
So I'll try to here. What's the difference between Apple as a private company versus the bureaucracy of the United States? So if we're going with the assumption that the Atom token is meant to be, both staking and currency token, then what we're implying is we're trying to get really rich people, whales as well, to also get involved and believe this as well. Think of your prototypical crypto whale, like, right? So what will happen? What we're assuming, what follows from our success is that the crypto whales are the ones calling the shots on what happens to crypto. Okay, so maybe that's okay, but I think what we want instead, because I think that is a system that will work. It's like a Nash equilibrium and it'll stick. But I think it would be better if we could maintain our like sovereignty as the people who were originally part of Cosmos, right? And we're the ones discussing this and trying to understand it. It's our world that we were creating, and still enable whales to be part of this, right? But not have to yield control to them in our deciding how to evolve our system called the Cosmos Hub.
I don't know, Jay. That sounds, from a guy on the outside of Cosmos and a guy who doesn't know Cosmos that well, that sounds like a different chain, bro. And I mean, that sounds like a fork.
I'm not sure what you mean. Can you clarify?
What you just said. You said you're dissatisfied with the current state of whales because, come on, who's using atoms for anything else right now but holding? And you would like to create a new moral from which, a new vision shall be accomplished. And you're saying that vision should be based on the original folks who were here long before the whales came in. And therefore, that vision, since we harken back to it, wait, hold on, nearly done. That vision, since we harken back to it, is the vision that we should implement today. So screw the whales, because you know what? We don't want them. That sounds to me like a fork. I mean, I hear a lot of forks. That sounds very forky.
I don't know where this tone is coming from. Hey, here.
What? Talk to me. I'm here. Talk to me. Tell me. Yeah, tell me. What are you thinking?
I think you misunderstood. I mean, I like the atom holders today. And I like how this is evolving. But I think what I'm trying to say is I want to preserve that. And I want to bring in more. I want us to bring in a lot more money. I want us to bring like a lot of money in the world. That includes, fucking energy money, oil money, gold money, like all the money. People are going to have to transition over to a new system, and I want us to build that system. But I don't want us to yield control and evolution of our system to all of those people in the process. I want us to remain, to keep our identity, all of the atom holders. And the way to do that, is to separate the sovereignty from global capital. So Photon becomes that token. Because there's always going to be the token that tries to keep, mesh these two together, and that's what old money wants, right? That would benefit them because they already have the money. However, the one that's actually going to succeed is the one that helps escape old money and the grips of its control. You do that by splitting the token.
How does splitting it help do that?
Because if we say that the autonomy, the sovereignty of the Cosmos Hub goes to the atom holders, which is us, and we create another token that is not that, but that otherwise everyone else will want to hold, that accomplishes that.
Wait, but why wouldn't they also, assuming there's some market price between photons and atoms, if all the whales own all the the capital can. Why can't the capital just own both photons and atoms?
They will want to. They will want to, but I think they will see that there is, in the steady state, like they're going to want to, the market cap of photons is meant to be much greater than the market cap of atoms. And they'll buy atoms and participate for as long as it is financially beneficial for them to do so. But we get to control that. Like that's a rate that we get to set because we control how photons are created. So in other words,
Wait, who's the we here? Like,
we's the atom holders.
People on the call, or is it atom
atom
holders? Because if it's atom holders, why would they want that? I think atom holders want their market cap of atoms to increase.
It's like the financial system created a system where they all had corporations with shares, and they created a common currency that was not the shares of the financial system. So there was a separation. I'm saying if you try to make a distributed federal financial system in the way that the banking system was created, say in the United States, but made it so that the common currency was actually a share of all these banks, it could work, but I don't think it would succeed in comparison to a more egalitarian, I guess, meritocracy-based system, whereby you have all the banks compete and you have shares in banks, and you have a distinction between who are the ones creating the financial system and who are the benefactors and those who are benefiting from the creation of the financial system.
Right. So you think the people who are rich and have a lot of money don't also own most of the shares of all the banks?
I think they do. Very very rich people and even not very rich people, they can have some portion, some relative, ownership. But I guess the key thing is, that like money wasn't shares. People want so you want to have a money, and you want to isolate that from like competition among those who create the system. Yeah.
But shouldn't that money be a stable coin? I mean, the U.S. dollar is stable with respect to the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
Also, why are we trying to create a money token? Like, aren't there like so many? Yeah. Like, there's stable coins, there's Bitcoin, there's Ether, there's like, shouldn't like. From my understanding, Cosmos Hub is never trying to become a money platform.
What I'm hearing from Jay is that the reason, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason is because all of those incur some level of like counterparty risk. They're not native to the Cosmos Hub. And so the idea is to have a money token that's more native. And the reason why not to make that a stable coin, as far as I've heard so far, is that that adds more complexity, and you want something just simple. So I think the challenge that everyone is raising is that there's enormous off-chain complexity in actually marketing and building community around and utility around such a token, and it's hard to make sense of it. And that maybe that complexity would dwarf the complexity that might be involved in making it a native stable coin, or in using something like the ETH bridge, which is going to have a lot of effort put into it being secure in the first place, right?
Well, okay. So I guess my response to this on the basis is, every sufficiently large sovereign zone is going to want their own money, because every sovereign zone is kind of like a little nation or city state, right? And we believe in a world where they all have their own local currencies, because we're trying to create a decentralized world, not one that is dominated by that tries to push its monopoly and ends up oppressing people. Right. That's what we're trying to escape from.
And policy, right? Like, and policy as well, right?
And policy, we want choice of policy. We want more experimentation. We want to give people the ability to exit from policy they don't want, to choose a currency and its coin and its zone and its token that they find more suitable. And so there's going to be a lot of these, and they're going to want to create them because, like I said, kind of like this is sort of the source of power, the ability to inflate money, create money, and use it towards a purpose. So every zone is going to have this power by virtue of it offering tokens that are inflated that people, and they're all going to connect to other, zones through IBC, and that's what we're trying to create is a interconnected city system. And they're all going to have their own nucleus of currencies. There's going to be exchanges between them. And to not have it kind of just means, you don't have the social clout to try to promote, your token, right? Or it's something where you don't really care, so you just want to export that, and right, one-off smart contracts and so on.
So, if you kind of split what the atom is and what it could be into two tokens, is the idea here that I don't get to sit on a ton of capital and I also don't get to make policy decisions? Instead, if I want to be able to, if I want the value that I currently have in atoms to be useful, besides like dictating policy or securing the network, I need to convert it into photons, and that way I can't enjoy both benefits simultaneously.
I wouldn't. I guess it's you're not prevented from doing both. It's just a matter of what proportion of both you want to hold in your portfolio. So if you just want, if you just want to, if you're more of someone who is investing in your ability to distinguish, good from bad, at the risk of peer slashing you, excluding you, then by all means participate in atoms. But most people should not be subjected to that kind of threat. That they should not, it's an expert thing that we live and breathe, but not everyone should have to do this.
If the value of, let's say, the market cap of the photon portion of the Cosmos Hub is greatly exceeds the value of the atom portion of the Cosmos Hub, doesn't that set up the conditions for like asymmetry? Since the atom secures the photon, wouldn't at a certain point, wouldn't people just want to start
have
atoms instead to kind of have control over what's happening with the larger value?
So I think so it's kind of like the dollar in the banks, and I think it's completely possible for try this a different way. So the zones that are the sovereign zones, like this other city states that connect the Cosmos to the Cosmos Hub, that choose to allow photons into their zones and use that because they just want for whatever reason they allow that, right? Let's say our peer zones are these other intelligent city states that are all sovereign. If our zone, which is supposed to be well maintaining the photon token, does something terribly egregiously bad, then like just stealing it, whatever, or if our zone breaks in half, right, and there's some split about what to do, our neighbors should talk among themselves and figure out what to do with the photon. So the control over the photon token can actually be taken away if the peers that are connected to it, say that it's better to replace it with another head that issues it. So there's this complex inter-zone checks and balances happening. So it's okay in that sense, as long as we build the system to enable the tiers of a hub to give it checks and balances, like I described.
I guess I'm kind of curious, Zaki, because I do want to give you some time to speak as well. I know you briefly brought up some ideation for something called the store value token. I think it was
Yep.
not completely named. Kind of curious what the characteristics that you are looking for in that. And I know that you've also written something about perpetual kind of staking derivatives idea. Is that kind of an extension from what you were thinking? And yeah, could you kind of just tell us about that? And,
So I'll say so I'm trying. So I view there as being like a series of. So I don't view the store of value token as potentially as truly an urgent problem. I think that what I've been trying to say I'd say that the closest idea of ideas that I think are good to like Jay's photon idea is the store of value token idea, but it is a much smaller in scope idea than which really still leaves atoms as the primary thing in our ecosystem. And I sort of view the bigger problem is the rise of exchange staking, which is something that is, I think, an existential threat to the value of the atom, and that atom holders need to respond to. And the reason why you build a perpetual staking derivative is not simply because you want atoms to be more useful, or that you need to fulfill a bunch of economic functions. It's that these economic functions are being filled in our ecosystem in ways that drive atom centralization and validator centralization. And the goal of building a perpetual staking derivative token is to create an instrument that instruments that actually provide countervailing incentives to those expert users of atoms today, so that they can so they have strong financial incentives to sort of continue to participate in the decentralized system rather than just simply holding your atoms on Coinbase.
So question. You're saying the primary objective here is to get people to hold and use derivatives of staked atoms, so that they don't have to keep money in exchanges.
So right now, if you hold money in the world's largest exchanges, what you're holding is a derivative of a staked atom today, because you get staking rewards, but you have liquidity and you can trade your atoms. And largely the delta between the value in terms of atom rewards, certainly you are getting fewer, you get fewer atom rewards than if you stake directly. But for especially retail scale holders, this isn't material. So they see huge benefits to being able to operate on centralized exchanges and hold atoms there. If we have staking derivatives, you'll create instruments that will allow people to go participate in various bonding curves, liquidity farming, etc. And basically find new financial opportunities that come from staking outside of the centralized validator ecosystem. And that's the motivation for that work. The motivation for the suggestion of doing a store of value token is basically this idea that I think the store of value token should get some percentage of atom and inflation and fee rewards, but it's essentially just a way of taking a sort of low attention bet on the Cosmos ecosystem, as opposed to taking the high attention bet that is staking your atoms, and then participating with liquid staking and various other opportunities.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
I have to go to another meeting.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have to run. Thank you for being here. Maybe we can have the staking derivatives part of discussions next week. I know that has been there's been a resurgence of the discussion there.
Optimized for a time when Bee Harvest is awake.
Yeah, is able to join.
Because the design that I think Bee Harvest and I have converged on is actually quite good, and it's a sort of a mix of both of our ideas.
Hey, can I quickly say something? I just had another analogy. here's something that is possible with the atom photon split. We start, providing photon usage. Some people start using it, and then there's a freaking market collapse, and there's suddenly a dire need for a UBI system, right? The Cosmos Hub governance with atoms can vote to say, hey, let's turn the photon into a UBI token worldwide. Sorry, I don't know if you guys. Oh yeah, here you are. And we can just vote to say provide this massive scale to the world, and we would still retain our ability to control how the evolution of the Cosmos Hub happens without suddenly it becoming a massive democracy experiment that we don't necessarily want right here, right now. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for being here. Join us next week. We'll have the new time announced potentially to fit in, hopefully fit better with the European and Asian schedule. Hopefully, I think liquid staking will be the topic. Not sure. Just keep checking out the Cosmos Twitter, and we'll keep you guys updated. Thank you all for being here, and thank you guys for watching.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
For the next call.
Thank you.
Yeah, guys.